Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of my Must Coffee Talk series. Today I will address the Starch solution by Dr. McDougall. For those of you who don't know what Starch solution is, it is kind of a magic diet, very popular in the vegan community. The point is you eat almost only starch because starch is super healthy, and the best thing is starch doesn't make you fat. You can overeat on carbs, you can overeat on starch, you can overeat on rice, and it won't make you fat. It sounds like magic. Really? I find it actually pretty funny because there's exactly an opposite camp. The people who shout that carbs make you fat because insulin makes you fat, so you should eat no carbs. So let's have a look at Dr. McDougall's Starch solution. I decided not to make a big literature research and search for argument to contradict Dr. McDougall. No, I just decided to chill, read his book and see what references he cites. Basically, what sources he uses for his arguments, and then check the research literature that supports his statements. So, shall we? A citation from his book. You would think that starches would promote excess weight gain, but they don't. That's because your body efficiently regulates the use of carbohydrates you get from starch. Even if you consume them in excess, the body will burn them off as heat and energy rather than store them as fat. Wow, sounds like magic. Now I actually know where Banana Girl has her information from. Now I understand it. To support the statement, there's the reference 18. So let's check out what reference 18 is. I have downloaded the paper, but I couldn't really find any statements that would really support Dr. McDougall's hypothesis. The conclusion of this paper was, weight maintenance is achieved by adjustment of food intake to match energy expenditure. Did I get it right? Isn't it like, if I eat more, I will gain weight. If I eat less, I will lose weight. It is about energy balance. Maybe I just got it wrong. So let's go on and check what else is in the book.
A widely held myth holds that sugars and starches are readily converted into fat, which is then stored visibly in our abdomen, hips, and buttocks. If you read published research, you will see that there is no disagreement about this whatever among scientists. And they say that this is incorrect. References 6 to 14.
This sounds really interesting. Let's check out the references.
If you replace dietary fat by carbohydrates, you won't induce fatty acid synthesis in the liver. Similarly, addition of carbohydrates to a mixed diet does not increase liver fatty acid synthesis to quantitatively important levels.
And now the important saying comes. As long as carbohydrate energy intake remains less than the total energy expenditure. What we learn from it, if you don't overeat and don't eat more than you should, then you won't produce fat from carbohydrates. It makes sense, right? But wasn't it that you can eat as many carbs as you want according to Dr. McDougall? This experiment was performed on 3 men whose glycogen stores were depleted by diet and exercise prior to the study, and then they went on a 7-day carbohydrate overfeeding diet. And what they found was that the men could store about 500 grams glycogen before they started getting fat.
And the glycogen stores are saturated. Massive intakes of carbohydrates are disposed by high carbohydrate oxidation rates and substantial de novo lipid synthesis. 150 grams of lipids are produced from 475 gram carbs.
Okay, I'm going to explain it now. When you consume lots of carbohydrates, then first carbohydrates go into your glycogen stores, especially when they are depleted, like in this research study. That's also what bodybuilders do before competitions. When your glycogen stores are full in your muscle, the excess carbs start being converted into fat. So you start getting fat. Another thing is that your respiratory quotient increases. which means that you oxidize more carbs for energy, for all the daily tasks, for moving, even for exercise, just that the energy you use comes from carbs. If the respiratory quotient is low, then it comes more from fat. If it is high, high is usually at about 1 or even higher than 1, then it comes from carbs. That's so simple. But it doesn't mean that you just burn a lot of carbs kind of for free. It doesn't mean that the carbs just get burned. No, this quotient actually says, no, you use carbs for energy and all the fat you eat, it doesn't get used for you as a fuel. Also, what we see here, that the guys produced 150 grams fatty acids per day, which got stored, so the guys got fat. And as you can see here on this graph, first the carbohydrates were used for glycogen, but then after 4 days, the fatty acid synthesis started and the guys started gaining more fat.
And as I mentioned before, respiratory quotient exceeded 1.00, which is indicative for de novo lipid synthesis.
Which means if the respiratory quotient is higher than 1, then you produce fat. And as you can see here, these guys actually gained about 1.1 kilogram of fat.
Carbohydrate overfeeding markedly increased net de novo lipogenesis at the expenses of glycogen synthesis.
Again, the same thing. If you eat more carbs, then you produce more fat. The subjects in this experiment gained a significant amount of fat during carbohydrate overfeeding. In this graph, you can see what happens with glucose, so basically with carbs, either if you follow a diet that matches your energy expenditure, or what happens if you overfeed on carbs. And as you can see here, fat production significantly increased. Next reference. It is about overfeeding on glucose or sucrose. Actually, it's not even starch. As you can see here, the fatty acid synthesis increased compared to the control period. A really interesting finding is that the subjects didn't really become fat, according to this paper. How can it be? Also, the researchers calculated how many grams fat were produced out of the carbs they overfed subjects, and it wasn't really a lot. They argue that the subjects produced just 3.7 grams fat per day during overfeeding. It's somehow really weird, right? Also, that's one of the arguments Dr. McDougall uses in his book. Sounds really interesting, right? I'm not really sure if Dr. McDougall read the references he cited, but he cited a paper where another researcher addressed the issue of this paper and explained what's actually wrong. So let's go back to Dr. McDougall's references and check out what the other researcher says about this research study. The thing about this protocol was, the women were overfed, however, the ratio of carbohydrates to fat in their diet wasn't really changed. So the surplus calories didn't really come only from carbs. No, they had still lots of fat in their diet, and fat intake was increased, and they got also carbs on top. And when we eat a mixed diet and overeat, usually our bodies just prefer to save fat first, because if they would convert carbs to fat, they would need to go through all the processes, lose the energy, so it's not that convenient. So they use just carbs for the energy one needs now, and fats get stored. So what happened in this study was, the people actually overate on carbs and fat. That's why fat got stored and carbs were used for energy. And these carbs are used for energy and to cover all the energy needs, not such a high amount of carbs was converted into fat. And what this paper further describes,
first, the overfeeding protocol provided less total carbohydrate energy than daily total energy expenditure. It was therefore energetically possible to substitute carbohydrate for other fuels without changing total daily energy expenditure or breaking any laws of thermodynamics.
this basically means if you look just at carbs in isolation, the people got then the amount of carbs they got was actually lower on energy than what they expended. For this reason, if you kind of separate it, imagine that all the fats were saved straight away, all the protein was used for other tasks, and if you take just the carbs to support body's tasks, then there were actually fewer carbs than the body actually needed in a day. So why should they be converted into fat? It doesn't make any sense. If you totally overfeed on carbs, which means you eat more carbs than they give energy for your body to exist, then you will gain fat. And this paper actually brought an example. There was a research study in which adolescent boys ingested 7,000 calories carbohydrates per day, and they gained 12 kilograms body fat over 10 weeks, while eating only 4 kilograms of fat. And you can see here, they ate a lot of carbs and just 4 kilograms of fat, but they gained 10 kilograms of fat. So where do the 6 kilograms extra fat come from? Well, they come from carbs.
Second, the period of overfeeding used in the study was relatively brief and included substantial dietary fat.
So they were overfed just for 4 days. You can't really draw conclusion from 4-day study.
We cannot extrapolate the results to longer periods of surplus carbohydrate low-fat diets. What are the implications of this model? Some conclusions should not be drawn. First, these results do not mean that extra carbohydrate energy represents free energy in terms of body fatness. By sparing fat in the body's fuel mixture, surplus carbohydrate energy will make people fatter, even though it is not directly converted to fat.
This is exactly the opposite to what McDougall says, because he says that you can eat as many carbs as you won't get fat. And the interesting thing is, he cited this paper. He cited this paper as a source that supports his argument, but actually this paper contradicts his argument. That is the funny thing. Here is finally a reference that kind of supports what Dr. McDougall says, that if you eat carbs, your energy expenditure increases and you will burn excess energy off. Here in this paper, women were put on a high carbohydrate overfeeding diet and compared with different diets, but we don't care about different diets for now. And the researchers found that the carbohydrate overfeeding increased the daily energy expenditure by 7%. Whew, that's cool. Okay, I eat more carbs, I expend more energy. But now let's look at the real data. On the control diet, the women ate 7.5 megajoules per day, and then when they were overfed on carbs, they ate more than 10 megajoules per day. So basically, they ate over 30% more than before. Do you see the problem? They were overfed by more than 30%, but their energy expenditure increased just by 7%? More than 23%, actually more than 25%, are somewhere missing. These are the 25% that will make you fat if you overeat on starches. Actually, some of the papers are pretty old, so I didn't get them online. That's why I just read the abstract.
Primary evidence suggests that increasing dietary carbohydrates at the expense of dietary fat may reduce obesity risk.
But it doesn't write that carbohydrates don't make you fat. Another paper that shows that the energy expenditure increases if you overeat.
Individuals who gain less body weight during overfeeding are those who experience a greater increase in total energy expenditure.
But it doesn't say that excess carbs don't make you fat, because if you look at their model, then you can actually see that for there's overfeeding, then there are changes in body composition, which means fat gain, and then also regulatory stuff happens that makes you moving more. So you will start getting fat and then probably start moving more. Another reference on this topic?
There was a fourfold variation in weight gain.
Again, which means the people who overate gained weight. And how big this variation is seems to be determined by your genetics. Okay, I think we went through all the supporting references, and we found out that actually, I think almost none of them really supports McDougall's statement. Let's go back to McDougall's book. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. This saying, from my lips to my hips, expresses the real-life effect of the Western diet. Well, if I overeat, where else the fat should be stored than in my hips? Well, I would probably prefer it if it would be stored in my boobs, but it's not in my genetic potential.
If you have your body fat chemically analyzed, it will reveal the kinds of fat you commonly eat.
When I looked up the references, it is actually true that the body fat storage in your body partly represents the fatty acid composition of the foods you eat. Yes, but the thing is, they don't make you fat if you don't overeat.
Correlations were somewhat stronger in 78 women with stable weight over the 6 months before fat aspiration. Weight fluctuations may alter the fatty acid component of adipose tissue.
Which means the women that didn't lose fat before showed a higher correlation. Which means if you start losing fat, then you just start losing fat. All the stored fatty acids will disappear. They're just stored because body naturally stores energy you don't expend. It's that simple. It is about energy balance. Fat on your lips is fat on your hips. Happens only if there's just too much fat on your lips. To give a short summary of the entire video, the references Dr. McDougall refers to don't support his statement. It is a myth that you can overeat on starches and don't gain fat. It is not true. Even the references Dr. McDougall cited in his book don't support his statement. And there are many more interesting things in McDougall's book. I will address them in the second part of the Starch Solution series. And if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would share it with others, because there's so many people saying that they can't gain fat if they eat lots and lots of carbs or starches. They go on this diet and they gain fat, and it makes them super unhappy. If you want to help others, then please share this video. Share it maybe with your friend who is interested in Starch Solution. Share it online, share it in Facebook groups, wherever. But I think the people should finally know what's really going on. Thanks a lot for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, it would be amazing if you would hit the subscription button below and subscribe. And see you very soon. Oh! I've just realized I showed you actually fewer references that are on the list. Why? Oh, because one of the references is cited twice. I should have done it in my PhD thesis. Then I would have had more references at the end. Would be really cool.
The warning about carbohydrates turning into body fat is a myth and nothing more. In humans, even substantial quantities of refined and processed carbohydrates contribute only a trivial amount to body fat.
Again, the same references. We went just through.
The same is not true of animal and vegetable fats, however. A passenger on a cruise ship gains an average of 8 pounds on a 7-day voyage caused by dining on buffet of meat, cheese, oil soaked vegetables, and high-fat desserts.
Dr. McDougall, where is the scientific reference? There isn't even a reference. I don't even know where to check this. It sounds just like a story. Please provide references so I can check them.